Welcome to the Revolution Church podcast.
Good morning. Happy Mother's Day. You know, it's always a tough one for me when you've lost your mother, but I also know I've got a lot of wonderful mothers out there and a lot of great mothers in my life and people who have shown up and my kid's mom and my girlfriend's a mother. So there's a lot of great people out there, a lot of great mothers, a lot of strong mothers, and we could not do it without you. I'm so grateful for all the moms out there today. I'm grateful that I got the time to spend with my mother. She was, I mean, everybody, you know, if you know who my mom is, and you know, she was quite a lady, quite a neat lady. It's amazing to think that the end of this year there's going to be a play about her on Broadway. So she lived well. Also, I know a lot of you ask about my dad and stuff like that. I talked to my father called me this week. As you know, we can be estranged at times and don't talk very often. But he called me. My phone, he called, and we chatted, trying to keep some of that personal. But me, I'm very transparent and feel like all of my life goes into my work. But it was nice to chat. He's sick. He's 84 and he's had a few strokes, and it's difficult to be in that middle area. I've got young kids and my parents are gone. My dad's passing, sick and is leaving this world, and mom's gone. A lot of us have been there. A lot of you have been there and done that, got the book, but it's difficult. But yeah, so we got to talk a bit. It's like we definitely disagree on theology, and we always end up there, but I think that's because we're both we both do similar work, and it's loving past that. It's loving past the disagreements. It's loving past. It's trying to, appreciate the time you had and together. But yeah, it's tough. So it's been a weird week for me. And Mother's Day is always, a difficult one. I don't know why that one hits a little harder than like birthdays and even her death day. But for some reason, I just think it's because it's a thing about all moms, and so it's like you've got all these feelings of like wanting to celebrate, your kid's mom and your friends who are moms, and then it's also your mom, and so you kind of held that place where you kind of miss her, and but we carry on. Here we are. I can't. So we did last week was 13. Part 13. We have literally been in Galatians for like 5 months. And we literally have done, this will be 14. This will be part 14. And I have every intention for us to finish this today. So I'm excited about that. If it's your Mother's Day, if you're having Mother's Day and you're like, oh, I should watch Revolution, you don't need to. We record it. You can watch it on the podcast. You can listen to it on a podcast. Even better. I think the podcast is even better because you don't have to look at me shake and act all weird. Because that's just how I talk when I work. I just feel every ounce of my body feels it. So you can listen to it later or watch it on YouTube later if you like to see me kind of curl into myself and read. But there we are. So yeah, happy Mother's Day, everyone. Lots of love to you. Thank you for all the hard work you do. Thank you for loving your babies and being great and bringing us water in the middle of the night and holding our heads when we throw up. And if you don't have a mom and you missed out on that, I'm sorry. I know it's tough. All right, so let's talk about this because I think this will get me into. Today is very personal. Galatians is not usually it is always a personal. I think everything is personal. I think, we have this idea of, well, we're going to be professional and we're going to take the personal out of it. But I think we can learn to communicate and allow feelings to be a part of it, but not allow our hurt to keep other people from it. And I think sometimes that's what happens, is that we allow our hurt from our stories and our pain, and we don't want to allow either they're in or we want to push everybody out. And that takes a lot of work to get past that, but it's important if in this work when you're loving others and trying to help others, encourage others. So last week we ended with vices and virtues, and we did the fruits of the Spirit, and I've just been thinking all week about that, about the fruits of the Spirit. I've been reading more of my John Hume book. It's a really big one. It's been really great to read it, and all of his hard work. But in between that, I've been thinking about like how we do that and how the fruits of the Spirit really tie into that, and how often we don't practice certain things. It's really strange to me is that there's some really great foundational ideas in Christianity that I feel like we really get away from, when we dive either into just too much theology or apologetics, or, when insecurity seems to come into the thing, or the need to compare ourselves to others. It seems like the basics of the faith take a back seat. And I think one of the things that Paul's doing here, and for him it's not the basics of there's no scriptures, there's no New Testament yet, but he's trying to keep that message alive. And speaking to my mother, she's one of those people who really always practiced those kind of foundational, love your neighbor, love your enemy, be kind to others, pray for those who persecute you, that type of thing. She always could disarm people, which I was always amazed by, because I've never been that great at disarming folks. No, don't forget to like and subscribe. I always forget to say that. Well, I don't always forget to say it. I say it every time. Just forget to say it in the appropriate spot. So, fruits of the Spirit were love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, joy, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Those are the things we're talking about. So 6, we're in 6, and 6 is the last verse, and we've been usually last chapter, we usually take a couple weeks to go through one chapter, but I think this chapter is pretty good. Scholars believe that around Galatians 5:13 is really where the letter goes into farewell mode. So we've already been in the kind of mode of wrapping the letter up, but 6 that's with us now that we have chapters and verses and things like that. That's the end there. So we're going to wrap that up. But this one's really personal to me for a lot of reasons. And let's just get into it, and we can see why. And I hope this is encouraging to you as well. My friends, now let's jump up, because I think reading the end of 5 goes really good with this. Let's start at 5:25, and then we'll jump into 6. I'll let you know when we get into 6. If we live by the Spirit, let us also be guided by the Spirit, which we talked about that being wisdom. The Spirit being like, if we live by wisdom, if we live by compassion, those type of things. Let us not become conceited, competing against one another, or envying one another. Here we are in 6 now. 6:1 says, my friends, if anyone is detected in transgression, You who have received the Spirit, which is this wisdom that we keep talking about, that's beyond just our own needs, where we have communal ideas where we work within community and loving others. You've received the Spirit, should gently restore such a one in the spirit of gentleness, and take care that you yourself are not tempted. 2 says, but bear one another's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. For if those who are nothing think they are something, they deceive themselves. All must test their own works, that's our own thing, then that work rather than their neighbor's work will be cause for pride. For all must carry their own loads. Now, I really like this in a way because what it's saying is like, we've probably all heard that love the sinner, hate the sin, which sounds like a good idea. Especially if sin is hurting other people, But here is what it's saying: kind of focus on your own work, your own stuff. Don't use that. Don't get into the comparing game with each other. Oh, they're like, because when you really compare people to others, that's a real quick way to end your serenity, to end peace, take peace out in your life when you're comparing yourself to others. And when you compare things to others. I always feel bad for like bands that have been around for like 30 years and they end up getting compared to themselves, like their good work is that work they did in the middle, that was the best, and so everything gets so their later work, they're like, I mean, that would be good for any other band, but it's not as good as they so you're comparing them to them, which is also an interesting thing, I've always thought. But one of the reasons this one was personal for me, especially earlier on when I first read this in my early 20s, was this idea of restore in gentleness and restoration in gentleness. And how, for me, growing up in the church, you hear a lot about forgiveness and a lot about grace, and you hear a lot about these types of things, but this idea of restoration, I always saw my dad try to practice that, because I can remember, and my mom as well, I would see them try to practice that with other people. I remember there was this one pastor who'd went through a bad divorce and everything, and he was really depressed, and my dad was counseling with him, and then one of my things my dad did was like, hey, why don't you come and host a couple of the shows? And this was when I was young, and he came and he hosted a couple shows, because my dad was just trying to be like, we got to help you get back on your feet. And, slow and steady, but restoration is important. And it's funny because when my dad had his stuff happen, that guy avoided my dad like a plague. But, that's just how life works. Unfortunately, life is not fair. Life is really tough. A lot of people don't care about others. We say we do, but we almost just compare about our images of others and how they look or appear, and that we judge that, and we don't really, when they fail, we go like, oh, good, and we move on. Like we often don't care enough about others, especially when they're maybe famous or powerful things. And I think there's parts of us that kind of rejoice when people fail. And that's what Paul is calling us to get away from, is this like idea of being like, oh, man, they finally got what they deserved. Paul's talking in a community here where the failure was really legalism and going back to the law. But he's even saying, like, to these people who got into legalism, to these people who went back to the law, to these people who said you weren't enough, you really need to love these people more, care about them, and bring them into, you guys need to restore each other when you make mistakes. If you fall into legalism, if you fall into whatever type of sin, he had that list of, if you see them practicing magic or whatever, or factions or quarrels or dissension, and in their anger, you need to help them and restore them in their failures. And so, I think about this. I really am struggling with this a little bit today because it's so personal, and it's Mother's Day for some reason. So this kind of keeps my mom like on the top of my head and thinking about that. Those who are taught okay. So for those who are nothing think they are something, they deceive themselves. All must test their own works. But here, this is this idea of those who think they are something, but they are deceiving themselves. So when we think we've arrived and we think we're something special, and we think we really have it all together, we're fooling ourselves. And I think the reason Paul's saying this is because he's saying everybody adds to a community. So if you really think you're something special and that you're, oh, I'm the leader and I'm the man of God or the woman of God or this or that, and I've got it together, or I'm, like politician or something, like nobody does anything alone. You need people to help you. Like, we've done Revolution for 30 years, and I can tell you there were times where I was sitting on the shoulders of people in my staff who were just making me continue to go and encouraging me to go, and that we just continued to like build off of each other's encouragement. Um, uh, so so there's that. We have to recognize that we're not, nobody's special. I think that's important. I mean, it's just so easy to, that's the interesting thing. Like when I've worked with people who I've really admired before, and you see their humanity. That's why they say don't ever meet your heroes, because you'll realize that they're human. But here's the thing: is for me, and the reason I kind of feel like I'm struggling with this today, is there's really a lack of restoration. And I get it. There's a lack of restoration, especially in Christian movements and things like that. I don't know if people are having a conversation. Someone said dodge the question more. I don't know if there's people having a conversation there or not. I can't read all the things that are going by right now. So I don't know if they're talking to me or you're talking to somebody else. I'm glad to answer things at the end of this if if you're still here. Lack of restoration is a big thing we see. A lot of people not helping other people get up from when they've been hurt. Helping people when they fail, when they fall. It's horribly sad. Hey, everybody, I'm going to just take a break here for 1 second. I've debated on trying to help some people come in and edit this, but I think when we have people calling each other a fool and things like that, that's not how we do this community. We really try to argue well and argue with respect and treat each other with common ground, even if we're on different sides, like conservative or liberal. So, if you could show some respect and be kind to each person, it's okay to disagree. We all try to disagree really well here. But calling people fools and things like that, that's just not necessary. We're all here to try to learn and grow together and learn how we can have better conversations and talk to each other. More censorship, that's hilarious. It's not censorship, it's just how like people like Dr. King have taught me, and John Hume and peacemakers have taught me that we also learn how to have good conversations. And I'll be honest with you, when I'm going to talk online, it's not always the best way to have a conversation. But just try to be modest and show grace to each other. So this idea of struggling and failing and the lack of restoration, especially in the church, is really ironic, because the church is based on, we do need a modifier, and we're going to hopefully have one soon. The guy who edits our stuff is not usually here on Sunday, so we'll get somebody on here. I do care about feelings, and that's why we're asking you to show some compassion today towards each other, and not, I get it if you're angry and you're hurt, but this is just not the place right at this moment. I'm having a rough time. I lost my mom like 15 years ago, and Mother's Day is really tough for me, so I'm really trying my best to just be graceful and nice. But let's talk about lack of restoration, and that's what we're talking about here. And this need to be angry, this need to be right, this need to be in control. Like, the lack of restoration in the church is insane, because restoration is built on forgiveness. It's built on when people fail, when people make mistakes, we help them pick each other up. And the lack of restoration for my family's life was really tough, because I never really saw, when my dad fell and my parents fell, I didn't see a lot of people in the church show up to our house and to encourage us and to help us and do things like that. What I saw was people staying away because they didn't want to get tainted by the the fallen. They didn't want to get tainted by someone who had made a mistake. They didn't want to associate with it, so they put like this judgment, like the scarlet letter on them. Like we don't want to have anything to do with those people, you know. And so there wasn't a lot of restoration. And so people are like, well, it's not our. And I remember like later in years, I would talk to churches and say like, I would be at like a Lutheran church or like a Presbyterian church, and I'm like, you guys can do restoration with people outside of your denomination and things like that. But my question is should, when someone fails and makes a mistake, we often become very suspicious of them because like Mark Driscoll, when he lost his church out here, and then 5 years he appears in Phoenix, Arizona, and he's got a mega church again. And we're all like, oh, we're so delusioned. We're so delusioned. But I don't know if there was ever a restoration process in that person's life. And for some people, if no restoration shows up, you go back and you do your work eventually. But it's like we've become this type of like this group that like we watch a car accident and we see the hurt people and we wait to see if they can make it out of the accident, and we can see if they can survive their wounds because we don't want to get too messy. And then we're like, well, now it's time to, now we can be like a hospital now that we realize you survived. And I mean, that doesn't make any sense. It's this idea that, I remember being as a kid hearing that Christianity was the only army that killed his wounded. And I was like, oh, I don't like that. That's not a good thing. Like, would you join an army or like even a camp? Like, would you join the Girl Scouts or the Boy Scouts if they're like, no, if you hurt yourself on the trail, we're just going to leave you here and hopefully you make it back. You're not going to join any group that says like, no one's going to join the army if the army is known for like, oh yeah, if you get wounded out on the battlefield, we just leave you there. So please don't tell the bad guys if they catch you anything. You know what I mean? Like, could you imagine? Like, no, people would be like, I don't want anything to do with that. And that was one of the things that was really crazy about studying John Hume, the politician in Northern Ireland who helped bring the peace process to the Troubles, the 30-year Civil War, is that he was working with people who sometimes had tried to have him killed. And he kept working with both sides because he saw both sides important. He thought, in order to get peace, we have to see each other as equals. We have to celebrate each other's differences to really find unity. We can't sit here and demand our own way. And I don't know if you remember a few weeks ago when we looked over a cross-reference with Corinthians 13 that said love never demands its own way. Or when we jump up to the fruits of the Spirit and it says, love is patient, and faithful and gentle, so these things, we've got this thing that's talking about restoring people gently. Now, when restoring is, it's one thing to become like, oh, I'm just disillusioned with it all. But at the same time, it's like, well, if there's not restoration, what happens? I mean, with my father, I watched people slowly just kind of test the waters to see if they would have him speak again or talk again. And now my dad is completely different than the person I knew when he was in prison. And the restoration wasn't like, it was always on these conditional terms. It was always like, how will this affect us? And to me, that's not how we heal others. We don't love others by going like, well, what will it look like if I'm associated with that person? That's not love. That's not grace. I mean, it might be a light type of love, but it's not how Christianity is based on working. This is saying like, if someone restore such one in a spirit of gentleness, this is even in gentleness, but we're all so jaded and so angry. We're going, well, that doesn't work. Or they just go back and do the same old thing. So we'll just give up. And that's what we've done. We've given up. And kind of cancel culture, Christianity, I think, originally started cancel culture. And then progressives thought, well, we'll show them, we'll cancel back, and then now everybody's canceling each other, which is completely the opposite of grace and completely the opposite message of Christianity. I always get concerned when I start seeing people in the Christian world practicing canceling people. I'm going like, now I'm not saying restoration means that the person has to go back into the same line of work or things like that. But the idea is like for someone like me, like what else are you trained to do? I've been trying to do some part-time work. I'm not trained to do a lot. I love this work. If I was in the denomination my parents grew up in, I would never be allowed to preach again because I've been divorced. So that happens. So we're known as this only army that kills our wounded. And now I see even the progressives kind of practicing that same thing of killing their wounded, or if they see someone wounded on the other side, they abandon them. They don't help them. We just don't love our enemies the way we're supposed to and the way we're called to. And it's really heartbreaking. It was tough to be a teenager and remember that all these people were fighting to be on my parents' show at one time and sit on their couch, and then sitting in a prison cell, visiting center, and no one wanted to come see my dad. No one wanted to talk to him. No one came out and made, a lot of pastors, and when you're a pastor, you can visit almost anybody in prison anytime. It's a lot easier for pastors to come in. And out of all these thousands of pastors that my parents worked with, none of them showed up. They didn't even really show up to talk to my family. And I could be angry and bitter about it. And there are parts of me that are angry and hurt about it. But there's also part of me that says I've decided to take those things and say, I'm going to learn from that and keep that from happening to other people. What can we do to help other people actually be restored in gentleness? And what is Paul telling us here? And what is the book of Galatians telling us here? The book of Galatians is simply saying, yes, when he says gentle, humble, this is like the Judaizers and the Gauls here. You could very well see them as, conservatives and liberals. And what he's saying is when you see someone who's on the other side that you're divided with, hurt, pick them up and gently restore them. And don't fall into the same thing that they're going through, because it's easy to fall into legalism or things like that, but gently, humbly help them up and restore that person. Help them get their life back. Restoration in the Bible is literally better than new. And we don't practice that. My mom once said that the church is too often a courtroom rather than a hospital. And I find that to be really true. And so this is really personal to me. Especially when I see a lot of people we always want to scapegoat the other side. And that's why Revolution is always trying to build a community of diverse thinking and bring diverse people together with diverse thoughts and ideas, so we can love each other and really practice this kind of community that was in the book of Galatians. But it's not easy. It's not popular. It's really not popular work. People don't want to hear it. It's not going to make you famous. It's not going to get you speaking gigs. But what it will do is if we practice it, we will change people's lives, and people will remember that moment that you loved them when they thought, wow, this is the last person I thought that was going to gently, humbly pick me up and help me. So, that's a big thing for me. I guess the other question is, as people in a community of faith and things like that, is like, for restoration and for forgiving and for loving others, do we depend on... That's another thing, is we always say, well, they're subject to their denomination. But what if they don't have a denomination? What if these folks don't have a community? And the fact is, most denominations aren't doing it. And the denominations aren't willing to reach across lines to be humble and gently restore people. I mean, if the church is... I feel like the church is really good at a lot of things, like working with the poor and the homeless. And, there's a lot of great churches that do that in all different denominational settings and all different political ideals. There are people who do that really incredibly. But we're not very good at helping people when they make mistakes. We're not very good at helping pick people up, especially if it's not like what we see as being politically correct in our time or things like that. And I was really surprised, because I've got this friend of mine that I've known for years, and very social justice oriented person. And they were online having a go at my dad. And I get it, because my dad says some wild stuff that I don't agree with. But then they start bringing up, like, he was in prison. He's he's an ex-con and all this stuff. And I was thinking, like, how do we hold someone's, like, you went to prison for your crime, you served your time, and then we hold that against them? And being a social, like, liberal, we wouldn't do that to normal people. But when we find somebody we don't like, and on the side that we don't like, all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, they're an ex-con. So we have selective judgment. We rather judge harsher someone who's on the other side than someone who's with us. You know what I mean? Like we're all about like, this person we love and care about. Yeah, but this person, they're an ex-con, The other person, we're like, they served their time. We've got to love them, So we become hypocrites. We are hypocrites, and we're hypocrites on both sides because I see it every day. Like I get as nervous now to go into a room of progressive Christians as I do going into a room of conservative Christians. I'm both nervous because I'm going, there's a different dynamics at play here, and there's still these conditions within everybody, and there's still scapegoating within everybody, and there's still this goodies and baddies idea that if we don't get past, the church doesn't survive at all. I mean, Jesus made it really clear. He's like, listen, a kingdom divided won't stand. If you people are constantly fighting with each other, that's why back in Galatians 5:15, Paul says, if however you bite and devour one another, take care that you are not consumed by one another. He's saying like, if you really want to see the joy of the Spirit, if you really want to patience of the Spirit and the kindness of you've got to show this. You've got to restore people. You've got to help them. And it should be people going like, we're going to do the restoring. Like there should be groups of people who are like, we're going to restore people. Because you can't depend on the person's denomination. You can't depend on non-denominations. I used to have this idea and thought, and I really wish somebody would have done it, is where all the denominations get together and they have no say over this place, but it's all therapists and counselors and job trainers and all those things. And it's a community just set up for fallen people in ministry work where if they mess up, any denomination, non-denomination, it is paid for by everyone puts into it. They can go there and they can have a time of healing, a time of discussion, even options of, doing different things with their life. I thought that would be really interesting and unique if we really cared about people. But unfortunately, we really just care about what they can give us. What's the next message? What's the next unique thing they're going to say? And this type of thing. And then when they fail us, we'll just move on to the next person. And then sometimes when the people come back, it's too late. You should have, I don't know if I trust you. But that's not that's not grace. That's not restoration. And that's why I usually I have a hat that's grace with the anarchy symbol. I also have my ring. It's grace with an anarchy symbol. And the reason that is because grace covers everyone. It covers the people you don't, it's like free speech. It covers the people you don't want it to cover. The people who you don't think deserve grace, get grace. You hear what I'm saying? Like, that's what grace is about. That's why it's amazing. That's why if people saw that kind of action within the church, where the church is the people who help not only their wounded, but others wounded, we would be seen as a community of hope. Like like when you read like the movements of the peace movement, the nonviolence movement in Belfast, or you read the movements about Dr. King's work and stuff like that. If someone came and said like, I'm sorry I was a bigot, or I'm sorry I was this, okay, yeah, we hear you. Come back. If you want to work with us, help us. Because that's how you build a movement. That's how you build a community. If you keep pushing people away, things die. And they're gone. It's not a movement anymore. No one's welcomed. No one's, everybody's shit stinks. And that's a harsh reality for us to deal with. I think all these wonderful plays and these things that get written about my mom and my dad, and things said about my dad. But, and really in the run, my mom died alone in the middle of America by herself of cancer, I even had people saying that one of the reasons my marriage fell apart, my mom got cancer, is because I started saying that it was okay to be gay. I mean, this is literally some people's opinions of God. They think God is this just like, well, let's destroy this kid because he cares, we'll kill his mom and his marriage, because he's a heretic. I mean, that's insane. It turns God into this insane madman, We kind of, and you start to realize that some of the people saying that are just creating God into their own image of like insanity. And it's sad. But even those people who judge, we need to reach out and say, hey, we've got to stop judging. We've got to stop judging each other this way. And they always, well, the verses say you can judge, but we can judge this. They always want to look for another. They're always looking for an asterisk around grace. And what is Paul saying here is he's saying, bear one another's burdens. when someone fails and has a burden, it's not always going to be pretty and cool and awesome. Sometimes it's going to be that they had an affair, or that they did practice inappropriate, or they took money when they shouldn't have done it. These things, people are going to fail and make mistakes, and it's saying help carry this burden with them. So you're going to get messy, you're going to get bloody, you're going to get covered, you are going to be associated with somebody who other people don't want to associate. I remember these people were talking when Mark Driscoll's church fell apart, and they were talking about his kids, and I said, no, you can't talk about this person's kids. Don't bring them into it. Like, I've been in this situation. This is not, they don't want anything to do with it. They were born into this. They can't help who their parents are. And people are like, you're not helping in this conversation. You need to go, people still pushing back. And so to me, the anger and the pain, it's completely an antichrist spirit, if you will. Like, it's an it's like this kind of like antichrist spirit. Now, this isn't saying that, like, okay, well, and I always have to put this because there's always people who have a hard time with nuance, and I understand that. I'm not saying like the person who beats you, like, okay, no, they've been beating you, now you need to restore them. No, I'm saying that it's our job to help people who are hurting other people or who are being hurt, and to keep that from happening and to help that from happening. I'm not saying like, well, you've been hurt by somebody, so now this is your job. I'm saying if we are in a community, we would allow other people who've been hurt and heal, and then those other people who've done the hurting also find a reason and help look at why they're hurting other people. Like, it's called growing and being in community. And the thing that's so interesting about Galatians is a small community. We're not talking about people all over the world with social media and writing. We're talking about a small community of people, and that's why Paul this is kind of it's concentrated. It's really concentrated because he's saying you are all living with each other and on top of each other, and every person's action requires a reaction. And let's try to get these reactions to where they're positive, where we're helping each other up, where we're taking care of one another, where we're not biting and devouring and destroying one another. I get for a lot of people that grace doesn't seem like justice, but I think there is justice in grace. And I think that's why we all have to have different parts. Like, we can't I'm not just preaching the whole Bible right now. I'm not going to give you everything you have to do, but I'm giving you a view of what's going on. But hopefully different folks see this in different ways, and we're able to work this into different ways. Sorry, I know that's a lot, but it is a lot. It's a lot for me. But do we depend on the denominations? Do we do this? No, do we depend on the church, or do we depend on the community? And I think it needs to be the community. And I think we're called as people to help restore. But one of the coolest things that happened to me right after my mom passed and my marriage fell apart, within like 2 weeks, Brian McLaren called me on the phone, and he wasn't aware what happened with my marriage. He just knew that my mom passed, and he had called me to say, hey, I'm really sorry about your loss. And I said, thank you. And I said, also my marriage I just found out some things, and it looks like that's over as well. And he said, listen, I want to send you a plane ticket, and I want you to come stay at my house for a few days and just hang out with me and my wife, and just give us a chance to just chat with you and talk with you and hang out with you. And I was grateful for that, because that wasn't, and I had a few people who reached out that way, and it was really great to see and to feel that love and that encouragement. And those are the things you don't forget, is when people, I had met Brian once before that for like 5 minutes on a car ride. We chatted, and it was more me talking to him because I really liked his book. And I got to know Brian a lot at that point. So it's not impossible. I've seen it at work. But I think what we're going to have to realize is this idea of restoration and gentleness is it takes all of us as human beings. It takes all of us. It can't just be, well, I can't help. I'm just this dude. I'm just a person. You can write a letter. You can send an email. You can send a text. You can send something that just says, thinking about you, I care about you. You don't have to agree with the person. I had a friend who was in this ministry, and was really awful to the people he worked with and everything, and he had to step down and all this stuff. And we had had a big falling out as well, you know. And his was a little bit in the public eye, and we weren't talking to each other. And I sent the guy a text. He never got back to me, but I sent him a direct message, and said, listen, we're friends. I've been there. I know what it's like to see everything disappear, and and not be and have people making fun of you and talking shit. If I can help, if I can be just a listening person or a soundboard, want to bounce things off, I'm here. And that's kind of what I've learned through this, is to not make everything black and white, not everything goodies and baddies, to live with life within nuance. When you've seen scapegoatism firsthand, and when you've seen it practiced by both sides, because I remember, I thought, all these mainline denominations were making fun of us too, and the other the groups I grew up with were making fun of us. The groups that hated us were making fun of us. The Saturday Night Live was making. I mean, it was like there was no safe place to be. And so I feel like I have a little bit of knowledge on how to speak on the importance of restoration, and the fact that it doesn't really seem to be happening, and that we don't really see it as something that's important or valuable in people's lives. And I can't say how much that is missing the mark and missing the point when we don't see. Like, one of the things I loved about Dr. King was, as he said, he said, these people, these racists, these segregists are not my enemy. They are victims, and they are victims of misinformation, and that's why they are acting like my enemy, because they have misunderstood something. And it is my job to help them understand who they are as well. And that kind of idea always stuck with me, is it's really tough, because you just want to be like a badass and be like, I'm going to take care of them. Wolverine claw, snick, snick. But instead it's going like, maybe these people are victims of misinformation. That's when I speak to my father. I think, I know that the theology he practices is probably about 250 years old. It's a very Americanized theology. It's a very basic understanding. And I tell him that, and then he tells me, oh, who are you reading? And what are you, very concerned. But I'm able to give him more grace, knowing that he's following into a tradition that a lot of people have just stayed into and are afraid to leave, because that's the price of certainty. The price you pay for certainty is keeping a lot of people at bay and hurting a lot of people, and not being able to give grace to a lot of people. That's the price of certainty sometimes, to be certain in your belief system and not willing to grow outside of that. All right, so let's try to get through this today. How long have we got? Oh, almost an hour. Oh, we got another one saying, bro woke up and chose autism. It's so funny that we get this guy's come back, and he's been here before, and he often says I'm autistic, which I really kind of take as a compliment. I'm really not autistic, but thank you for the compliment. I am a thinker, and I do overthink quite a bit, but I feel like that's part of my gift. I also think it's incredibly sad, because I feel like you've probably been hurt by a lot of people, so you just hide behind a name and get on things and judge people and say nasty things to them. And what I want to say is, we have grace for you. You can be here. Just try to show respect. You can show disrespect to me, just don't show disrespect to others. And the laughing emoji, just is such a huge defense mechanism and a defense system. I've been there, Like today, you're making fun of me. Today, I'm really grieving my mom. I lost my mom about 15 years ago, and Mother's Day is really tough on me. And I'm having a really hard time being here. Now, I'm just explaining my place for you. You're a stranger. I don't know you. I don't know your issues. But it's wild that we can't have this type of we can't make allowances for people being different or acting different or thinking different. And if this is how the world continues to be, then the world, it's chaos. That's just we can't empathize with one another. We can't feel with one another. And you're like, I'm going to get up today, and I'm going to go into a community this, or go into, and and try to just tear them apart or try to get somebody's. I mean, it's just, that's not a way to live. It seems empty. It seems sad. It seems like you walk around feeling like shit all day, because it's like you're so deflecting. Like, oh, I'm going to be the judge and jury, and it's just like, I mean, I'm sorry that you have a life that this is where your life is and this is where you find entertainment, man. Anyway, for those who, we got to get through this. 3, for those who are nothing, think of themselves as something, they deceive themselves. So that's one reason we often don't help each other, is because maybe we think we're better than the people who failed or the people who've made mistakes or, the people in front of us. But another reason we often don't reach out to others is because we don't think we deserve it or that we're good enough or that we can help them. And that's another big problem within the community of Christianity all over the place, is this concept that I'm not good enough, and, like in the 5 points Calvinism, they have like total depravity. And I don't agree with that at all. And when Paul's talking about the Spirit, he's talking about this idea of having compassion for people in your community and building your community and wisdom and understanding with people. So I think for a lot of us in this country, in the United States, a lot of us in the church, we've been told we're shit for so long that we think, well, what could I do? And like I said before, a simple DM, an email, a text, finding out somebody's address and writing them a letter. There's nothing more powerful than like getting a handwritten letter to someone just saying like, hey, I see you're going through something and I just want to say I see it. Or you're doing a great job and I just wanted to say it. I had somebody sent me a really nice message on Facebook the other day, and I have probably shared it 5 times because I didn't realize I needed to hear it. And this person just wrote this really nice thing to me, and I really needed to hear it. And I just thanked them on every single platform I had and posted their thing because it was so kind and it meant the world to me. And because I was feeling like in the dumps, and I literally forgot, like I thought people maybe had forgotten some of the things I've done in my past with helping others. And so it just felt like it was, it was such an encouraging moment for me. It was like, so you've probably seen me share it around because we were talking about how this is 30 years of revolution and doing this work. And so it was quite, they just saw a post of me talking about, hey, it was 30 years, check out our website, and it was just nice. It made my day. So you're not insignificant. I didn't know the person who wrote the thing. They weren't even using, it's not even their name. It would be like Unstoppable One sending me a message, hey, you've done this great stuff, and I just want to say I remember and thank you for what you're doing and continue to do it. I was just like, so that made a difference, I don't know who my church is. You can see the comment on Instagram if you want. I think you can see it, all these things too. It just made my day, made my week. I'm still feeling like, and sometimes we need validation. That sucks, right? But what do I love when I love my neighbor? How do I love God if I don't see a God before me? So who do I love when I love God? I love the other. In 1 John it says, how can you love a God you can't see if you can't love people you can see? All must test their own work. So he's saying focus on yourself when it comes to these good deeds and bad deeds. You don't need to get online and go like, you're a piece of shit, and oh, you're political because they're bad. Or, often you got to understand, like, why am I angry at this person? And is there something I see about myself true in this person? Or a lot of times it's like, I believed the same thing and now I'm really angry that I believed what they believed. So I'm going to make a really big stink about it because I bought into it for years as well, and so now I'm going to be mad, and showed them the little grace that everybody showed me. And there's this projection comes a big part of it, and that often happens, but that's not a way to heal. That's not a way to look at their own selves. I mean, I just saw this like the other day, this really cool guy online, but he's like this ex-pastor, and I was watching his stuff and some of it was really great, but some of it was just like, you could tell like this guy is angry and pissed off and doesn't know what they believe and feels really mad that they know what they bought into. And I think the gracious thing is to say, hey, I was where you were at one time. I thought the same way. I wasn't, if someone hadn't handed me a book or had someone not taken a minute with me or someone hadn't sat down with me, I mean, honest to God, like my theology changed so much over time, because people maybe handed me a book that I took to read, or someone I respected, or a friendship, like my friendship with Pete Rollins is why I'm able to read, why I started reading philosophy, and, you know, kind of just led to a deeper thinking. And he was one of the ones who really encouraged me not to scapegoat people, you know. So it takes a village, it takes a community, you know, it takes like, so that happened to me. It also takes someone going like, hey, you did really great, and I remember when you stood up for LGBTQ people, and I really appreciate that. You know, those are the things that encourage us and help us to grow, you know, rather than being like, well, let's find the people who haven't come where I'm at, you know. It's like when I heard that they were protesting Shane Claiborne at Wild Goose for not being vocal about being affirming yet. And I used to be that type of person who was like, are you affirming? You better be affirming. But at the same point, I'm going like, maybe you guys should be handing him books, you know, and having conversations. Like, I don't know if protesting another Christian at a Christian festival if that's really going to change things, you know. And I know Shane, I know he'll talk to you. He's a human being, and he's very human, you know, and you know, you can talk to him. So in my mind, it's like, just, you know, don't be mad at him, because, you know, be happy that you got there before Shane did. You know, whoa, how cool is that? Like, he hangs out with Brian McLaren, he hangs out with all these, Tony Campolo and Peggy Campolo, and I got to a place of this where I found out this was important before this person did. And now it's my job to help communicate how important that is and how valuable that is, you know. Rather than going like, you should be saying this, you know what I mean? You should be I always get people like, why aren't you speaking up about this? You know, why aren't you talking about this? And sometimes I'll take it as like a firm, like, you're right, I need to be talking about it, firm rebuke, and be like, you're right, I got it. And other times it's like, I'm not that part of the body. I can't do everything all the time. But I can tell you some people who are doing really great work in that area or in that idea. Or I could also say, I'm not there yet, or I've been there and done it and I didn't find out that it worked well. You see what I'm saying? Like, this is the idea of carrying one another's burdens and being responsible for ourselves, rather than thinking we're responsible for everybody else and that we have to point out everybody else's failures. I mean, what is the difference of a really cool guy, let's use me for an example, and me going and talking about taking the piss out of every person that I don't agree with on the left and the right, and I'm naming them and I'm doing all this and I'm pointing out their shit and blah, 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 blah. You know, like, you know, it doesn't change anything. All it says is like, I'm just going to make fun of people who were at a place that I'm glad I got out of, you know. I mean, it just doesn't, it's not building community. It's not helping, you know. Like, I learned that a long time ago, thank goodness. So for me, when I would see even people who were critiquing my friends, I remember this one guy critiqued one of my favorite writers, and he wrote this long review and really why he was no longer, you know, he felt that the guy was lost it. But I also knew the guy a little bit who wrote it. And so I said, hey, what's your address? And I got on Amazon at the time. And I sent him a few books and said, listen, man, if you read these books, I think you might have me something different. I said, this one book I sent you, you literally only have to read the foreword. The foreword, I think, is the most important part of the book, you know, and I'm here to talk about it if you want to talk about it. Like, there's better ways to solve our problems than making fun and mocking each other. That doesn't build community. That builds builds just more resentment on each side, and we just become more divided. And what did Paul say? Don't bite and devour one another. What did he say? Like this bad works where bad jealousy was. He's bad, not bad jealousy, bad the flesh. You know, he would say dissension, factions, quarrels, envy. You know, these are the things that tear each other apart. I mean, don't practice these things. So when we see each other and we practice these things, asking like we've got the corner on something, we've missed the basics of Christianity. We have missed literally just the foundations of Christianity when we do this to each other. And some of the smartest people with way more, I don't have any degrees, but have like 5 or 6 degrees, and I see them doing this and I'm going like, well, you know, you start to question their, like, what do they want? What do they want? What is the goal in this? Is the goal to be liked? Is the goal to be popular with amongst a certain group? Or is the goal the longevity of the movement, of the revolution? A revolution literally is like to re-evolve. We evolved a certain way, and now we've got to learn to grow and re-evolve. All right. All must test their own. I'm going to just read the end here because I want to get through this today. So if it's a little long, it's too long for you, no worries. You can listen to it later or all that, that's fine. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. That really does help our work. All must test their own works rather than their neighbor's works. Hear that? All must test their own works rather than their neighbor's works. So don't go constantly try to test your neighbor's works. And your own works will become your cause for pride. So there's, pride doesn't always come before Paul. For all must carry their own loads. So I love this. It's saying share in one another's burdens, but also accept the fact that you're probably going to have to carry your own load. And there's not a lot of people out there sharing burdens. So you're going to probably be carrying your load and helping carry someone else's load, because not everybody's doing it, because not everybody really cares. Not everybody really gives a damn. But this is the only way we're going to keep this community alive and together and not completely divided, and you're not going to be consumed by each other. And that's tough. That's when you go like, what does he mean by picking up your cross or dying to your flesh? It's not like, oh man, I really wanted to go to that rated R movie, or oh man, I really wanted to pause that scene where there were boobs. It's like, this is insane. Like, no, it's carrying each other's burdens. It's helping each other out. It's carrying your own burden and not going like, I'm going to put this all on you, because that's often what you find is there's these people who are always willing to just shut you down no matter what. You say the sky is blue, and H2O, and you could give all these facts, and they would find a reason to say you're a piece of shit, So there you go. For all must carry their own loads. And so when you see that, what I say is that we've got to be extremely grateful for those who come on and say, let me help you carry that load a little bit. I've got a friend of mine who knows I've been financially struggling this past year, and he's helped send me a little bit here and there personally, and it really made a huge difference. And it was carrying the load. It's like, hey, I know you've got a lot going on, and you're also freaked out about groceries and taking care of your kids, But the other day when all the shit hit the fan, that was the first person I called, not because of financial needs, just because I was hurt, and I just knew that this person understands what pain is. This person understands suffering, and maybe I can talk to them about this situation that I'm in with with my dad, and see if we can, just talk, because it's someone who I know cared about me. All right, so here we go. Now get ready. This is real biblical right here. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked, for you reap whatever you sow. And I mean, I'll tell you what, that kind of thing that type of verse I felt like I grew up hearing a lot of that type of thing, like, God will not be mocked, And sometimes I have it used against me. Like, people are like, even my own dad is like, you can't make the Bible say what you want. You can't mock God. And the other day I used my favorite line from Brennan Manning with him. I said, Dad, God's quite fond of me. He's like, yes, I know God loves you, but he can't, I'm going like, but. There's always a but. I'm sitting there going like, I'm very confident I'll see you again. But when it says God is not mocked for what you reap or whatever, what is he talking about as God is not mocked is what we've been talking about this whole time. The Judaizers in here saying like, you got to be circumcised, you got to do this. Or Peter saying like, I'm not going to sit with the uncircumcised. I'm only going to sit with this group of people, so I'm not seen as unclean and not judged by other people. To Paul, that's mocking God. To creating your own factions and having your own little in-group and saying, oh, they're all bad and we're all right. God's saying that Paul's saying that's mocking God. I mean, you could even go as far as say denominations are kind of mocking God because we're not able to be in complete community, or I can't preach there, or I can't take communion there. Like, we're not all as really well. All is welcome, but don't try to get on staff. You could say that. I'm not saying that because but I do feel like anything that keeps us all separate and divided isn't really working well as if we want to really be a community and a real movement. But God is not mocked or... Oh, I forgot to read 6. That was a Freudian skip right there. That's when you're like... For all must carry their own loads. And 6, and this is... Here, I'm going to raise some funds right now. Those who are taught the word must share in all good things with their teachers. So that's saying support those who teach you, support those who help you, support those who encourage you. And that's what that's saying. So if you like this work, help support it. I've got other people who I love their work, and I try my best to help support it. and talk about it. If I'm reading a book that I like, you're going to see it online. I'm going to be talking about it. I try to support those who teach me as well, because I want to spread the good news as well and good things, and say, hey, this person's written somebody that I think is life changing. Anyway, whatever you sow, okay. If you sow your own flesh, which we know is quarrels and dissension and strife and jealousy and anger and all these things, you will reap corruption from the flesh. But if you're of the Spirit, you will reap, which remember, we're talking about more like this wisdom. When we talk about the Spirit, we're talking about love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control is what we're talking about. And not being conceited and comparing ourselves with others. So if you sow to the Spirit, you will reap eternal life from the Spirit. So let us not grow weary of doing what is right, for we will reap at harvest. That might be the hardest part right there. Bam. So let us not grow weary of doing what is right. I will be honest with you all. There are just times where I'm so overwhelmed with this work, and I love this work. But when you can't make ends meet, or you're doing all this stuff and you're struggling and you can't get hired at other jobs, and your family, your mom's gone, you can't talk to her, your dad doesn't want to talk to you because you have so many differences. It gets really like, it gets really tough to not grow weary. So I want to say, like, I know a lot of you are like, Jay, this kind of sounds great, but it also sounds really tough. And some of you are doing it and you're weary and you're already here because of that. But don't grow weary, is what it says. But I'm weary, but like I said, those notes and kindness and support and things like that go a long way. If we do not give up, so then whenever we have the opportunity, let us work for the good of all. You see that? The good of all. He goes, and especially for those in the family of faith. Now, the reason I think Paul is saying that right there is because the big division right now is caused by the family of faith is divided. And so especially for the family. So this is a particular letter written to a particular group of people. So we have to remember that as well. He's talking to these folks saying your faith community is completely divided. So, but work for the good of all. And that's not for the faint of heart, because people are frustrated and people will drive you crazy and people will push you. And it is hard to be able to think, well, what's best for them? So that's tough. Here we go. And especially those of the family of faith, which he's trying to speak to his group here. See what large letters I make when I write in my own hand. Paul often didn't. He dictated his letters. So here's Paul getting serious, wanting the Galatians to see his own handwriting. Some believe he had eyesight problems, so he was using large letters because he could barely see what he was writing. I mean, I can imagine if I was born during biblical times, without my glasses, I can't see anything. I'd be like, give me another one of those crystals so I can look through and read this. Like my reading days would be over. I would have to depend on people to read and write for me if it wasn't for these glasses. So we have to keep eye doctors around in post-apocalyptic times, in order for me to be a badass on my Mad Max machine. I got to make sure that we have an eye doctor around. Okay, that's my attempt at a very dry joke. Also, I watched one of the Mad Max movies yesterday. See which large letters I make when I am writing my own hand. It is those who want to make good showing of the flesh that try to compel you to be circumcised. So he's trying to say those who want you to be good and act a particular way are doing it for themselves because they want to be shown. And I know what this is like. When I was early in ministry, I always worried, like, how are people who come to my church going to reflect on me? Oh, and then you just go, like, you don't care. You just go, we're humans. We're all in this together, I remember sometimes being on the train when we were doing Revolution in Brooklyn, people were like, oh, I'm so sorry, I wasn't at church Sunday, and I'm like, I don't want to, people don't need to be here every Sunday. Don't feel guilty. Revolution in this community is not a reason to feel guilty. Only that they may not be persecuted for the cross of Christ. Now that seems wild because you think, well, Christians think they're persecuted for everything. But at this time, in this area, just bringing up crucifixion and saying that your God is connected to crucifixion is like saying, like, just because I'm promoting the electric chair of Bob, you'd be like, you follow the guy Bob who was killed in prison and was electrocuted by the state? That's who it was that crazy talking about crucifixion at the time. Even the circumcised do not themselves obey the law, but they want you to be circumcised so that they may boast about your flesh. So he's saying sometimes people don't always practice what they preach, but sometimes, numbers and people under them and being a powerful leader or having a big community thinks you can boast about it. But people aren't the fruits of the Spirit. They'll know you by your fruits. This guy's got a mega church, so he must be right. He must really know his stuff. I sat down with the church with one of the biggest pastors in all of the country, which probably is all of the world, sat down, and they did not know why Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed. They didn't know that it says that if you read further on, you look further on in the Old Testament, it says it was the lack of hospitality and how they treated strangers, and that they killed and stole from strangers. It wasn't anything being gay or having sex with angels or anything like that. And this is the biggest preacher in the world at the time. Biggest church I've ever seen in my life. Biggest audience I've ever seen in my life. So that's not necessarily a sign of the fruit. That's not a sign of being a successful follower of the way. Not that there are things I don't know, because there's a lot. Every time I watch biblical scholars talk, I'm always like, oh my gosh, I preached it the wrong way. So I get it. I'm just saying, doesn't mean much. May I never boast about anything except the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ. Remember, what that do is also talking about being like Christ is carrying others' burdens and carrying your own burden. By which the world has been crucified to me. And I think this is interesting to say where he goes, the world has been crucified to me. And to the world. World has been crucified to me and I to the world. And I think what Paul is saying here is everything we've been saying is like grace. Like, honestly, it doesn't make sense to love those who persecute you. It doesn't really make sense to love your enemies and restore your enemies to most people. And so when and one of the things I've found to be very true is when you love people outside of your own, let's so-called tribe or group of people or political people, and you start to love and show compassion for them, you will often become an enemy of your own community, because it's so much in our mind that, there's got to be this particular type of justice there, and that maybe you're winking at someone's, bad motives or something if you're loving them or helping them or encouraging them. I mean, it is literally this concept of like more tribalism becomes more important and identity becomes more important than loving the others. Like, oh, that's not how we do it here, So that always happens when you have to say, well, I don't live by that. For me, grace is anarchy. So you're telling me that guy who killed all those people and is sitting in prison and said a prayer and now he's good and forgiven. Yes, I'm saying that, but I'm also saying that, the person you don't like at work might be too. I'm saying I actually think everybody is in. I don't believe in eternal damnation. But, so there you go. That's how unfair is that? And that's not a worldly idea. I think if I want to be more worldly, I would be like, let's destroy these people. So that's what I see is when I see people going like, oh, this group is shit and they're bad and they're horrible and I was a part of it and we got to destroy them or we got to make fun of them. We're going to talk about them. That's what I see is like, well, that's no wonder you're popular, because that's how we work in the world. If you start saying, no, we got to love these people and care for these people and talk to these people and have compassion for these people, then you're going to be like, but what if they get bigger, or what if it doesn't destroy them? And you go like, well, love is, Dr. King and John Hume, who actually saw the end of the Northern Ireland conflict. I mean, they all practice this concept of loving your enemy and treating them well and having conversations with them and including them in these discussions and in these ideas, and good things came out of it. But that's not always the first way, that's not always the first. We always, vengeance or getting even or something always is that's what I think when Paul's saying, I'm not of this world. I'm not going to get vengeance. I'm not going to give final judgment. I'm not going to start my own fraction. I'm not going to sit and be jealous because they've got a bigger book deal than me. And I'm not going to start quarrels all the time. I'm not going to do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to be patient with this person and show them kindness and generosity and faithfulness. I'm going to pray for my enemy even if it's from afar. Even if I have to pray for those who persecute me from afar, that's what I'm going to do. Now, what I'm talking about, I really believe could change the world and change politics. I think if religion got completely out of politics, it'd be a better place. If the politics focused mostly on us being able to eat well, have jobs, payable wages, and homes, and things like that, and weren't getting involved in faith, and faith wasn't getting involved with it, we'd have a better world. I think that should be the point of the government, is to make sure everybody's taken care of. And then we can argue about this stuff. You don't need to put your convictions into law. We're trying to avoid the law, and then we're like literally taking convictions and turning them into laws. You know what I'm saying? And I don't think that that's the way to do it. So that's my radical idea. But it's also my radical idea with Christianity, is that we make room and allowances for each other's failures, and we kindly and gently try to restore people, and we help carry each other's burdens, even when that's not comfortable. For neither circumcision nor uncircumcision is anything to do with it. For them, because that was the whole point of Galatians, is like the Judaizers, and they have to be circumcised if they really want to be Christians, and Paul's saying no, they don't, and it doesn't matter if they get circumcised or not. Circumcision has nothing to do with it. When circumcision has anything to do with it is when you start saying that, oh, I've been circumcised, so now I must be right with God. And that was one of the arguments I was trying to have with my dad. I was like, Dad, even if I'm wrong and I have bad theology, my heart's in the right place. I mean, do you think like I'm going to be thrown into an eternal dungeon of flames my whole life because, I read something wrong? It's not really about those things. Anyway, as for those who will follow the rule, as for those who will follow these rules, hold on. For neither circumcision nor uncircumcision is anything, but a new creation is everything. And that's unity through diversity. That is unity through diversity. That is us carrying one another's burdens. That's us being patient with one another. That's us not biting and devouring one another. That's us not going straight to war, but also not being afraid to have conflict and have hard conversations and tough conversations. Okay? It's all, that is the new creation and everything. That is the grace with no asterisk. As for those who will follow these rules, peace upon them and mercy and upon Israel of God. And I love how he says peace upon them and mercy. And he says peace and mercy because we need peace and mercy in our own lives, because we're going to be trying to give peace and mercy to those others as well. And it's not easy to do that. And it goes on now. And this is it, folks. We did it in 5 months and 14 parts. We've finally gotten here. From now on, let no one make trouble for me. I carry on the marks, Jesus' brand of my body. And he's literally saying, I've been beaten 100 times and dragged out and even been stoned, like not stoned, but like had stones thrown at me. So I have marks. And Jesus' brand on my body. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with your spirits, brothers and sisters. Amen. And I love that. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you. So today I end with, may grace be with you all. Thank you everyone who's interacted over this past 5 months. I can't believe we're done with Galatians. I've done Galatians I've taught out of my whole life. We've probably done it, 10, 15 times. We've never taken this long. We've never taken such an in-depth study. I'm going to try to get all 14 parts put together in one place. So if anybody wants to no one's going to listen to, that'd be like literally 14 hours of talk. And I've already gone almost an hour and a half today. But we did it. We finished Galatians. I'm shocked. I'm amazed. I'm a little bit sad to get out of it. But our next talk next week is going to be on Paul Tillich and a sermon he gave, I think it was at Union Seminary, called You Are Accepted. And so your homework this week is you can go on to our Instagram, or not our Instagram, you can go on to our Spotify or our Apple stuff, or you can even go on to the YouTube here, and you can look up Pete Rollins' name, and Pete Rollins reads "You Are Accepted." It's beautiful. His Irish accent is lovely, and he reads the whole talk, so it's really, really wonderful. So you can listen there, or you can go to Google and write in Paul Tillich, "You Are Accepted," and you can read the whole talk there. I'll be reading it next week. We'll be going through it. Probably take 2 weeks to get through. I'll read it some, and we'll talk a little bit about what it means and where those things are, and we're going to kind of dissect Dr. Tillich's sermon. But I think it's one of the best ever. And then after that, we're going to do something on Dr. King. But next week, we'll start on Paul Tillich, "You Are Accepted." So look it up. If you have a printer, I don't know anybody who does have a printer anymore, but print it out, highlight it. It's also in a book called Shaking the Foundations. The sermon's in that by Paul Tillich. That's a collection of his sermons and his talks. So I recommend getting that book anyway. And you can get it on eBay from, I think, anywhere from like $1 to like $100, because I think there's, original printings, and pick that up. So we did it. Here we are. 5 months, 14 parts of this talk, 30 years of revolution. And I think you can see why this book's important to me, because not only is that where the church is, but that's where the country is. And we are completely divided. And I have a dream that we won't be divided. And that is going to be my work. Everywhere I go, I will talk to people about not scapegoating and about loving each other and showing grace. This is what my blood is. And I feel that this is the cause for my whole life and the purpose and the reason behind my whole life. And so I will continue to do this work no matter what. You can help by donating finances by going to revolutionchurch.com. It's tax deductible if that's important to you, and making a donation. That is the only way we survive. We have bills, not just payroll, but we have bills we have to pay. I've hired good people who handle our finances are really good, because I want our finances to be, every T line and every I dotted. I think it's valuable to this community that we have that, and so we've got that, and so we have to pay them as well, and pay for our different websites and things like that. And also for me to be able to do this, I am actually have an interview on Tuesday for a part-time job, so hopefully that works out. So if you're thinking about me and you pray or you have good vibes or whatever, Tuesday morning I'll be having an interview for that, and I'll let you know more about it if it comes to pass. But we do really need your financial support. We can't do it without you at all, period. I mean, that's just, and it's been really a struggle. We're just keeping our heads above water, but it's 30 years. So if you're worried about consistency, we've got that. And if you're worried that about the message, the message is going to stay clear and loving and inclusive, and we'll continue to move that. So this work is it is what it is, and it'll just continue as much as I can. And, as long as I can, have a roof over my head and take care of my kids, I will continue to do this work. And thank you all so much for your grace. Thanks so much for putting up with me. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, share with your friends, share on social media. That's another way you can help us. But thank you so much, everybody. We did it. I can't believe we did it. I felt like we'd never get done with Galatians. So grace be with you. And by the way, when it's with you, give it to somebody else. All right? Thanks a lot. Bye. Happy Mother's Day, by the way. Happy Mother's Day.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. To make your 100% tax-deductible donation today, please visit revolutionchurch.com/donate. You can also learn more by clicking the donate section on the website.